Okay, hello there everyone, and welcome again to another Hempology 101 lecture. As I suspected last week, the lecture this week is on the medicinal uses of cannabis, and Gayle is our guest speaker. I'll remind everyone here that there's no lecture next week. It's reading week, so there really isn't much happening at school. There will be a normal 420, but we won't be having a lecture. And then the following week, I have another guest speaker lined up. Ernie Jakob from the North Island Compassion Club is going to come down and discuss his work with his organization, kind of in the context of medicinal cannabis in Canada and how that's been working over the years, or not, as it is. And so really looking forward to having Ernie come down for his first time and speaking at a Hempology event. But I'm also really looking forward to having Gayle share her experience, which I've obviously heard quite a bit, yet every time I hear her speak, she says things in a way, or gives me a new understanding of the medicinal uses of cannabis and our products. And so, as always, it's a great pleasure of mine to introduce Gayle Quin to speak today. Thanks, Gayle.
Thank you very much, everybody, for coming today. I don't really have a lecture prepared because when I try to do that, I stress myself out and can't sleep for days. So I prefer to just kind of wing it. I do have a topic today, or else I would be asking you what you want to hear about. So please, if there is anything you want to know about, don't hesitate to interrupt, stick your hand up and ask questions, okay? Ask me anytime. Like I say, I don't really have a structure for this class. I'm just going to talk to you about my personal experiences, both my own personal experiences and those others that are related to me through my work at the Buyers Club. Because I've helped a lot of people there, and I rely on people's feedback on how the products are working for them or not working for them, and their own individual problems for developing new products, which is one of my jobs with the Buyers Club. And it's a very exciting job, I'll tell you that right now. It's very rewarding and on a lot of different levels, both with the people that I get to meet and the medicine that I get to make, and the people I get to teach how to make their own medicine, because that's what I love to do the most. I like to teach people how to look after themselves. It's very empowering to know that you can go and grow your own food and you can make your own medicine right at home. And the universe has been wonderful enough to plant a pharmacopoeia outside our doors for us if we bother to listen and look and read. And on that note, that's another reason why I don't have a very structured lecture, because there is so much literature out there to read. I'm going to tell you about a couple of websites to check out if you want further reading and you want specific detailed knowledge, because there's just too much to cover in an hour to get into major details. So I was going to start at the end, but I guess I'll start at the beginning. I was introduced to the cannabis plant when I was 13 years old by my older brothers and sisters. And I actually was first introduced to hashish, and when I first saw my first pot, I asked what the heck was it? Because I just been smoking hash for a few months. And it was in the first year of my use that I discovered for myself that it was helping me medicinally, even at the age of 13. I had extremely heavy and painful periods. They were quite debilitating, usually for the first 3 to 5 days, and that could happen 1 to 3 weeks out of the month. I was extremely irregular as well. It was very debilitating, like I said. I would be curled up in a little ball for the first 3 to 5 days, and suffering from heavy cramps the rest of the time. So I found that when I smoked cannabis, the first thing that happened was it eased my pain. I wasn't in constant pain all the time. And over time of using it, my periods, the bleeding became less. The cramping was still severe, but through the controlling nausea and pain, I was at least able to function and go to school, which I hadn't been able to before that. So mostly I used it recreationally, although I had noticed that it did help me medically, because I didn't know any difference. I thought this was normal. I had been sick most of my life. I didn't know what it felt like to be healthy, which may seem weird, but so I didn't have anything to compare to how people were supposed to feel. It wasn't until about the last 20 years of my life that I actually started to have what I would call a normal, healthy life now. So moving forward, actually I'd like to discuss that a little bit more, because the very first time I had a toke, it was really it was life-altering. It felt like a light switch had gone off inside of me, and I've heard other people describing it now, and now science has actually figured out what it is, and it's your inside, your endocannabinoid system being fired, and it is really like having a light switch being turned on inside of you. Because if it wasn't for our endocannabinoid system, you could smoke or eat all the pot you want and it wouldn't do anything for you. Same as opiates. Our bodies produce cannabinoids and opiates in our brains itself, and we have receptors for these plants. That's why they work with us so well. So moving forward a few years, I got married at a young age, and I had very difficult pregnancies, and I did use cannabis throughout my whole pregnancies. That controlled nausea and vomiting, which I had 24 hours a day. I didn't just have morning sickness. And without cannabis, I don't think I would have been able to eat and actually carry my first child to term. Carrying on. Hi guys, how you doing? Welcome. And again, it was mostly pain and nausea that I used it for. Nausea was one of the first scientifically admitted uses that cannabis was really beneficial for. It was discovered early in the 60s and the 70s that AIDS patients who ate cannabis were able to control their symptoms and actually eventually start getting healthy. I've got some friends that I've had for 35 years now because they ate cannabis right from when they first discovered that they had contracted AIDS back then. So it's really an amazing plant, and I know it's helped a lot of people's lives other than just my own. And when you're eating it is different than smoking it. Smoking it titrates your problems. It's easier to titrate. You can take exactly how much you need because you can go toke by toke, and when you've had enough, you can put your joint out or your pipe down or whatever. But eating it, it lasts longer in your system. So if you're trying to eat cannabis for the first time, I ask you to just eat a very small amount. And that's because the very first time you eat cannabis, your body can have severe reactions to it, or more extreme reactions to it, than it ever will again. And this is one of the few things that science hasn't been able to explain about the cannabis plant yet. And if you eat too much to start, it's really a very uncomfortable feeling, but it also sets up your body needing more higher doses as you carry on. So it's really important to just start out with low dosages. And this is being shown to be extremely important with the introduction of the CBD strains of cannabis that people are growing now. There's a high demand for CBD products, and myself, I think we should just be using the hemp plant. It's already high in CBD. It's got an amazing amount of medicine in it that I'll get to a little bit later. Don't want to bounce around too much. I'll try not to. And its reactions are more so than the other cannabinoids, that lower doses in your body work better. So it's not like taking more is going to work better. It's going to not work as good for you as if you stay on low dosages, which is I found rather interesting and pretty exciting new development in the plant. Let's see, I want to...
Left off of your pregnancies, pick up a bit.
I want to introduce, well, there's a lot of controversy about using cannabis, any drugs, of course, while you're pregnant. In my own children, I found there was more harm done by the tobacco I smoked with during my first pregnancy. My first son has a slightly impaired circulatory system, and my second son, I managed to quit smoking tobacco by the time I was pregnant with him, and he doesn't have any of those kinds of problems. Just his feet get a little bit colder than they should. That's all. It's not a real impairment. And the only studies that I have seen about cannabis in pregnancy have come from Jamaica, and they proved that it raises your child's IQ rate. So it's extremely one of its main medicinal properties. The cannabis plant is for controlling nausea. I haven't found anything else to come close to it. There's other herbs that are good painkillers, and I'll get into them in a little bit when I get into some of the other things that we make. And but for nausea, ginger comes close, but it doesn't seem to do quite as good a job for as many people as cannabis does. So I didn't feel too bad about smoking it while I was pregnant, because I was glad to have my sons. So the next major problem that I developed came from overuse of antibiotics. I had all of these internal problems that the medical profession couldn't figure out what was the matter with me. They kept telling me it was all in my head when I had a chronic pulmonary inflammatory disease. But I seemed to be like a canary in a coal mine, and I developed things a couple or 3 years before the medical community has even heard of them, which is a little bit frustrating in some ways, but anyway, I'm still here to talk about it. So again, that was mostly controlling pain through and trying to eat, because what it did was ruin my digestive system. The antibiotics just, I could hardly eat anything. It was, I couldn't digest food. Eating food made me sick because my stomach was so ruined that it couldn't digest it. So I smoked a lot of pot just so I could control the pain and manage to eat a little bit now and then and keep it down. So as I learned more about antibiotics and more about my own health, the doctors weren't help. They were getting as frustrated as I was because they couldn't help, and that's when I started leaning towards more alternative practices. And I met a naturopath who talked about food allergies. Never really heard about food allergies at that point. This is still in the early 80s. and discovered I'd had a hysterectomy because I had a food allergy nobody figured out. So, because my periods got to that bad a point, and the infections wouldn't quit even after I had my sons. That by the age of 25, I had had a complete hysterectomy except for one ovary. So with the use of herbs, I managed to get my one ovary working again. Anyway, so because I think I was about 30 years old when I first tried to go into menopause. It took me a while to figure out what was happening to me because I was way too young, for one. So I ate herbs to get that back under control. And I was working in a hospital at that time and contracted Hepatitis C. And I was hospitalized for 10 days, quarantined for 10 days, and then finally let out of the hospital 2 weeks later after that. And 8 months after that, I was finally diagnosed with hepatitis C because they'd never heard of it before in BC at that time. We had to send my test down to the United States. So hepatitis C is an inflammation of your liver. A lot of people have it but never actually have symptoms of it. It lays dormant in you. But I had a full-blown attack that almost killed me. My liver swelled way up. It felt like I had a football stuffed underneath my ribs. I vomited for about 3 days straight before my husband put me over his shoulder and carried me and actually made me go to the hospital, because at that point I still didn't want to go to the hospital, but I knew I didn't have a flu because I was still just throwing up, and by 3 days later I couldn't even say no. I had no energy at all, so away it went. So cannabis, again, being my first choice of medicine, was again my first choice of medicine. Because when the diagnosis came in, I asked the doctor what to expect, and he told me to expect to get cirrhosis of the liver within 2 years and expect to be dead within 3 years after that. And I think I was probably 35 years old, and my sons were still young teenagers, so I said I just found that absolutely unacceptable and went home and started reading my herb books again. But I did come back and talk to him whenever I found out a new treatment that I was going to try, like a vitamin C flush. You just eat as much vitamin C as you can until you get diarrhea, and then you back it off, and you keep doing that. And I told him I was going to try eating more cannabis, because I had been smoking it a lot because I was growing my own on Salt Spring, but back about 10 years earlier, I had ordered my first cookbook, cannabis cookbook, from High Times magazine. And I just sort of found it one day and I thought, I'm going to start eating cannabis again instead of smoking it so much. And I told my doctor that I was going to try this regime of the vitamin C and eating cannabis every day and I was still smoking it because smoking gave me the instant pain relief that I needed, but when you ingest it, it'll last a lot longer. If you smoke it, it lasts from like 20 minutes to a couple of hours, but if you ingest it, it stays in your system from anywhere from usually 6 to 24 hours for most people. So I was having a hard time getting through the night, which is one of the main reasons why I wanted to start eating it. I couldn't smoke enough. I just couldn't smoke enough to knock myself out. And I needed sleep because I developed chronic fatigue syndrome a couple of years after that. And I had extreme environmental sensitivity, illness, and chemical sensitivities as well because of the shape of my liver it was in. So anytime I had to travel to go see the doctor, I'd get, like if I had to go on the ferry and take the bus, I'd be sick for months again afterwards. And eating it, I found I could actually sleep through the night. And just being able to sleep was a big step ahead in being able to improve my health. If anybody knows how cranky you get after losing 1 or 2 nights sleep, imagine how cranky you get after not sleeping for 2 years. Because chronic fatigue syndrome, you go to sleep but you never go into REM, so you wake up feeling exhausted because you've never actually gone into your deep sleep mode. And eating cannabis allowed me to do that, and so I kept up my program and went to see the doctor, and 2 years later he looked at me one day and he said, "I think you're getting better." And I thought, really? I said, I wasn't going to say anything to you, but I've been feeling better, but I wanted to just not say anything and see what you found out first. So that was really exciting. He was all very supportive. I was lucky in that way that he was always very supportive and documented what I did. And just told me to go home and keep up what I was doing. So along the way I found out I had mercury poisoning, and that's where I probably got the hepatitis C from, because it's just a constant poisoning to your body, and your liver is your blood filter, right? So it was constantly being poisoned. You can hepatitis C is not just a virus, it can be caused by chemical exposures and whatnot as well. Things like that. So, actually, is it still? Oh, I'm going to have to check that out. Sorry. I'm going to have to look into that. If it is still turns into a virus caused by chemical exposure, I'm going to have to check that out. More research. So it really helped with the chronic fatigue and letting me sleep. That was monumental and important. And so next, I found out about mercury poisoning and started detoxification chelation therapies for that. And after 11 years of eating my cannabis and doing the detoxification, 7 years ago I got an all clear. They couldn't find any traces of the virus in my body anymore. And I think I was the very first person in BC to get on my disability for hepatitis C, and I think I'm the first person in BC to get back off of it. So I was pretty proud about that. Let's see. I've had a couple of minor little things along the way that's helped to introduce some of my new products and to think of, rethink of old ways to use cannabis the way they used to use it. I like reading in old herbal books. They come up with a lot of neat ideas that we seem to have forgotten in the advent of modern medicine. One of them is a poultice. And I'll pass it around for you to look at. A poultice is a herbal combination that you apply to your skin. It's usually used to pull infections. It can stop bruising, and it's a direct painkiller for you apply it wherever you hurt. We make them. We make it out of the leftover leaf that we make our cookies out of. The plant material never wants to get rid of all of the oil, so there's quite a lot of oil in it, and we keep them in the freezer, and you can reuse it over and over again. And I tripped on the way to a doctor's appointment one day at the hospital and landed on my wrist and got a small hairline fracture. I couldn't flip my arm or touch my 2 fingers, so it's on this side of your wrist. So I went back to work. I think it was like 2 or 3 days after we decided to start making the canna patches, so we had some already made. And I'd always joked right from an young age In high school, I got nicknamed Roach because I was always the last one smoking the joint down to nothing. And so I just joked from an early age that I was donating my life to science to see what a lifetime of cannabis use would do to a person. So 56, I'm still kicking. So I got back to the club. My wrist was killing me, and I'm highly allergic to codeine, so I didn't bother to ask anybody at the hospital for anything. So chemically sensitive, I can't even eat like half an aspirin. It just feels like I've eaten a whole bottle full of razor blades. It's horrible. And so I said, well, okay, here goes the guinea pig again. Where's one of those canna patches? And I taped it with masking tape, turned it into a cast on my wrist with masking tape, and started and looked at the clock and timed it. Within 4 minutes, I could feel a reduction in the pain, in the amount of pain in my wrist, and in 4 hours later, I had no pain at all, and I still couldn't close my fingers, but I could turn my wrist. And I'd change it like every 3 or 4 days, depending on how much gardening I was doing, and into a new patch. And it healed in 3 weeks, and its wrist is stronger than, they've always been weak, but this wrist is stronger than this one now. And I've joked a few times that if I ever have time, I'm just going to tape one onto this and leave it there and see if I can strengthen it up. Yeah. Any questions so far about anything?
Where would you get one of these patches?
At the club. We make them at the club. You have to ask for them. Yeah, but otherwise they're very easy to make if you have access to cannabis. We use the leaves for it, and you could just mash them up in a little bit of olive oil if you didn't have enough for cooking with. But like I said, when we make our batches of oil for doing the baking with making the cookies, we save the leftover leaf after it's been pressed, and you just wrap it up in cheesecloth. We put a little piece of patty paper in there to keep the oil from coming through the other side. So they're very simple to make. There's a tutorial on our webpage. The cookbook's all online. All of the recipes are online, and Owen made a little tutorial on how to make the patches as well. But pretty much however you can make them stick together, they'll work great. So. And you can keep them in the freezer to reuse them over and over again, so long as you're not, like if you're using them to pull an infection, you'd want to throw it out after, and make a fresh one after every use. But if you're just using it for pain, like I brought mine with me in case I need it, because I had one of my major molars pulled out yesterday. So I've been walking around like this all day yesterday, and this is how I slept last night with the patch, but no painkillers and no antibiotics. So, because I'm very sensitive to antibiotics too, I took a prescription for them to make my dentist feel better, but she knows darn well I won't ever fill it. And I told her I'd just go straight back to work and start eating our lozenges, which I find our best antibiotic. I'll pass one of them around for you to look at too. These are one of the things that I've developed from feedback from our other members from specific disorders coming up, and it's exceeded all of my dreams. That little thing there. They're made out of goji berries, slippery elm bark, buds infused into olive oil, and we make it's like a gelatin water by cooking flax seeds, so there's no sugar in it. That's what helps hold them together. and lecithin, of course. Lecithin does a couple of things. You should put it in all of your baking. It's a fat emulsifier, so it helps your body absorb the oil better. And we always cook cannabis into oil because it has such a high affinity for oil. Just eating hash, it would not work as well as if you put the same amount of hash into a teaspoon of oil and then ate it. The oil starts to break down the resin glands and absorb it, and makes it easier for our body to absorb it. So it's really important to always add lecithin into your baking. It's also a nerve protector, and all of our nerves are made out of lecithin, so it's an important nutrient, especially for anybody with any kind of nerve disorders, MS, Parkinson's, like anything like that. The thing with them is you can tuck them into your cheek too, and let the cannabinoids absorb homeopathically through your mucous membranes, and when you ingest cannabis, a lot of the active ingredients actually get destroyed by your digestive system. And so when you can ingest it when it can go straight into your bloodstream, it lasts a lot longer and you get more medicine out of it as well. Those are great. The lozenges are amazing antibiotic. They'll stop your teeth from getting abscessed. I've stopped quite a lot of teeth from getting abscessed, and so have other people. One of our members has had a bowel surgery canceled by using them. A major blockage in her bowels. It took a year, but it dissolved them right out. So I can't stress how important it is to eat cannabis, as well as if you have any medical conditions at all. Smoking is amazing medicine, but eating it just takes it to the next level. Okay, so that was my arm. The last thing that I've been using the second to last thing, because the last thing was my tooth, but 2 years ago I was diagnosed with cancer. I had my right breast and 20 lymph nodes removed, and I used cannabis extensively for pain control through the last year before my surgery. I had a hard time, I'm too honest, and whenever I went to go see a doctor, I told them that I used cannabis, and I was told to leave. I'd never had a problem finding a doctor who had a problem with the use of cannabis up until the government got involved and the MMAR was introduced. And since that time, it's just been appalling. Well, that's up to your discretion, but that's what I found. So I was finally kept my mouth shut about my cannabis use and said, I need help, please. So they took one look at me and said, yeah, you need help, and got me into the hospital pretty quick, and was indeed cancer by then and not just a lump anymore. And I used cannabis mostly for the control of pain at that time. I ate a whole, I didn't bring one, a bottle full of canoil, which is like 2.5 grams of bud cooked into 2 ounces of olive oil. I was eating one of those every day. And I ate one the night before I went into the hospital for my operation. And when I woke up, I never needed any painkillers at all. I could tell as soon as I woke up that all of the cancer was gone, and I felt better than I had ever felt in years and years and years. And the doctors couldn't believe that I didn't want any pain medicine. I couldn't believe I didn't want any pain medicine, actually, because I knew I'd been cut wide open. And it was really quite amazing that it had lasted that long, 24 hours for one, since I ate it, and I still didn't need any more pain medicine. And they kicked me out of the hospital right quick because I wasn't taking any of their medications and they didn't want me to get an infection. So I got to go home right quick and be able to continue eating my cannabis. But I use it topically extensively as well. We have quite a few different kinds of massage oils. Pass it around. You can try this if you want. It only takes 1 or 2 drops, goes a long way. Most people, I find, if they have a problem with it, they use too much. It really only takes a couple of drops to say do it, soak your elbow or whatever. That one's just straight cannabis. We do make about 6 different kinds of massage oils with mixing in different herbs, because like I say, we have many herbs to use, and when you mix some plants together, it makes both of those plants work even better together. And cannabis is one of these plants that mixes really well with a lot of different plants, and I think that's one of the reasons why it mixes with so many different people as well too. It's quite an amazing plant. I think it's because we've lived with it for so long. We've lived with this plant for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. I think it was one of our first foods, that we actually carried around with us when we were still nomads. The regular is really good for pain and inflammation, but for more specific things like arthritis, we make one that's mixed with arnica. It's like half regular massage oil and half arnica. And we've had arthritis surgeries canceled with the regular use of that. I had both of my knees were crushed when I was a teenager in a car accident. Stupid moment. Teenager moment. And this knee was operated on, and most of the cartilage is taken out of it. And they told me I'd have to have the other knee done eventually. And I use indeed, this one gave out at me at work in the hospital, and I had to go in and get it operated on, and it kept bleeding. I kept getting bruising all around it constantly. And I was like, what the heck? At first I thought it was from the Hepatitis C, because it can cause spontaneous bruising, but then I realized it was because I had no cartilage in my knee. And I was trying to run around and stuff on it. So St. John's wort is pretty much a specific for bruising. It helps our bodies break them down and reabsorb them safely without forming clots and whatnot. So I thought, well, okay, we'll try mixing it with cannabis, and mixing it with cannabis made the St. John's wort work even better. It's amazing for stopping ear infections. 2 or 3 drops in your ear, it will stop an ear infection pretty much overnight. I use it every night and try to use it every morning, but I usually get out of bed too fast, but at least every night, or my knees get too sore to do a lot of walking. So that one keeps me going. That's another good use for it. Yes?
Maybe you can tell us a little bit how cannabis and olive oil interact. Like, why do we infuse into olive oil as opposed to canola or grapeseed?
Oh, okay, I did a little bit, sort of, but it's mostly because of the affinity that cannabis has for oil. It, traditionally in India, they've made bhang for centuries, and it's made, they cook cannabis into milk, and the milk is full of fat solids, right? And it's those fat solids that help break down and absorb the active ingredients out of the cannabis. It's all I can think of is the fat. Any kind of oil or fat starts to break down the resin,
But is there a
right?
reason,
Because the resin is not water soluble, right?
is there a reason you use specifically olive though?
Specifically use olive for your skin? Yeah, well, because it is so good for your skin. There's been books written on the curative properties of just doing full body olive oil massages every day. So it's again mixing two beneficial plants together to make an even stronger, more beneficial medicine, right? Yeah.
But coconut oil works too. We're starting to make products using coconut oil for the skin.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, any kind of oil. Yeah. We'll break it down, and we're oil. We're animal fat, right? So animal fat absorbs animal fat. It makes it easier for us to absorb it as well if it's put into oil. So does that help, Kristen? Okay.
Thank you.
So we make also comfrey massage oil. It's excellent for not only healing bones and reducing pain, but it's really good for increasing your circulation. So anybody with any kind of heart conditions or diabetes or anything like that, it really helps your circulatory flow to your feet. What else do we have?
Are these products
I guess
for sale?
Are
Are these products for sale?
Yeah. Yep, they're all for sale at the club. And to join the club, you need proof of a permanent physical condition or disease. So you need, or a specific recommendation for the use of cannabis from your doctor. So, we also take the massage oil and turn it into a salve. This is a green lion salve. It's sort of like Tiger Balm, but without it's not quite as hot. Some people like the salve a bit better. It's a little bit more portable, and it's more like a first aid salve. It's quite easy to use. Our newest products, though. Okay, well, I did bring a cookie to show you too, because we're famous for our cookies, I guess. And cookies are amazing medicine. That's all I can say. They're amazing medicine. But it's hard for the medical community to wrap their heads around cookies as medicine. So we're developing a line of different kinds of capsules. We've been selling Ryanol, which is leaf infused into grapeseed oil. And we also encapsulate our canoil, which is bud, infused into olive oil. But we've expanded quite considerably with the because we're getting a lot of questions from the medical community. They have a hard time wrapping their heads around, how can I prescribe a cookie? They just can't quite relate to that. So by putting it in capsules, they can say, okay, cool, that's like a pill. You can take between 1 and 3 pills depending on how you rate, how they affect you. So, and it is a big guessing game. Everybody is so different. It takes a lot of experimentation. And like I said early, always start low. Start with a very minute dose, especially if you've never eaten it before, or you're getting somebody else to try it who's never eaten it before. We're making a CBD capsule, which is you probably heard about in the news and whatnot. It's the new cannabinoid everybody is talking about because it has a lot of medicinal benefits without the psychoactive effects. A lot of people are afraid of the psychoactive effects because of what the media has been telling them for decades. And that's quite understandable. And so the CBD takes that fear away from a lot of people. Although we have had varied reports back, quite varied reports back. So cannabis is one of these plants that will take your body in whichever direction it needs to go. So some people find the CBD caps very sedative and will knock them out. More people have found that they're quite energizing. But there are some people that have found that just they'll just knock them right out. So it's personal experience, and it's what your body needs. If it's knocking you out, you probably need to sleep. Is what I say. So, because we fight our bodies too much. We have all this electricity surrounding us. It keeps us at a higher vibration than what our bodies should be at, and where it's always go, go, go. People have a hard time relaxing. So that's one of the wonderful things about cannabis is you can eat a couple of a couple of rhinos or a couple of canoil caps and have a good night's sleep and wake up feeling like yourself in the morning. You don't have a lot of the residual effects that people find from sleeping medication, if it works for them at all in the first place. So how is that for you for the CBD? That answer your questions for that? Okay, cool. We also make a non-decarboxylized capsule, and most of our edible products are decarboxylized first. It's a heating process. In an airtight container, you heat your cannabis to up to 300 degrees for half an hour, and it converts the two inactive THC acid molecules into active THC. So one of the things that mostly we do that because most people who use pot like being stoned, like the effect, the high that they get off of it, and when you do that, it increases that effect by 3 times because you're converting those two inactive into active molecules. So, but in that THC acid has its own medical effects. So we've started making one of them is it's a stronger anti-tumoral. And then again, not always, because not all cancers are the same. Not all tumors are the same. Some are benign, some are cancerous. There's many different kinds of cancer. So it's again, this is why it's really important for us to really push to work with cancer agencies and whatnot, because there's so much potential in this plant that and there's such a wide variety of illnesses that we've got to get it targeted more specifically. And that doesn't mean it has to be made by a pharmaceutical company. All of these products we make at home. It's just in our own kit. We have our own kitchen for the club, and we try to make sure all of the products that we develop are able to be made by anybody in their own home. We don't want to look after the world. We want to teach people how to look after themselves. It's really important to us, and it's one of the reasons why we're going to Ottawa as well in April the 1st to fight the new regulations, because this is a plant. We should be allowed to grow this plant at home in our gardens with our tomatoes. They've tried to, step on the toes of farmers already, so we got to put a stop to it somewhere along the line. How are we doing?
About 5 minutes left.
Okay. Any questions so far? Think anybody's wondering?
Yeah. You were talking about how you should be able to grow your own, and I wonder if you think there's medicinal benefits to the actual act of growing the cannabis.
Totally. It makes most cannabis growers spend time with their plants, which means they're relaxed and not stressing out too much. A lot of people really like to spend a lot of time with their plants. Any kind of gardening gardeners is beneficial. You're getting grounded, working in the dirt. You're getting time to meditate. People don't take time to meditate, to just sit there and try not to think about anything. It's really important for us to do things like that. And it's one of the things that I've heard about cannabis gardeners. They just love to just sit in their garden and be with the plants. It's sort of makes them meditate now and then. And that's really important for us because we're always doing something. We're supposed to be humans being, and it's not humans doing. Okay, well, I'd like to thank you all for coming. Please look forward to seeing our new improved cookbook online. Like I say, we've just come out with about how many 10 different kinds of capsules, so there will be more written about that. I think in not this newspaper, but the one before, there was a bit written about them in the updates about each specific one, so you can check that out online or in the paper too if you want to know more. And then if you do come up with other questions, just call the club and leave your number, or if somebody there. Everybody's getting pretty educated at the club and can answer most questions, but you can always leave your name and number for me and I'll get back to you when I can.
Yay!
Thank you very much, Gayle. And yeah, as she said, we're just making a whole bunch of new products for our club. She said 10. We tried to have 10 caps. We've gone down to 9. We've been cooking cannabis and glycerin, and we're going to put that in caps, but that didn't make much sense. For those that don't know, veggie glycerin is actually produced when you're making veggie fuel. It's a byproduct of it, which is why it's actually right now so cheap and available. It's sweet, actually, and so it could be very easily put into drinks like a hot lemon. So we're going to be selling it. I think right now we sell it in canoil bottles, but we'll be selling it in droppers, so it's easier to put into drinks and stuff. But glycerin is not only fat soluble, but it's water soluble, so we can put it in, say, bathing salts as well, so that patients will be able to put it in their bath water, and the cannabinoids will go through the entire water, so that you can bathe yourself in cannabinoids. So we're coming up with that product with glycerin, and as well as thinking of some others, and are also coming up with some new lozenges. Gayle showed you the wolfberry lozenge. We plan on coming up with a mango lozenge. For those that don't know, mango actually enhances the effects of cannabis, just a little bit, but we figure enough to make a lozenge out of it. And so that's a product that's on the horizon. And another one I don't think she mentioned we're working on is some suppositories, because for a lot of patients the use of suppositories is much more appropriate, especially with cancers in that area of the body, prostate cancer in particular, people would find benefit for. But we've actually had doctors recommending cannabis suppositories for people with brain tumors and stuff. When you use suppositories, you're avoiding your stomach and liver again, which break down the cannabinoids a little faster. So suppositories is one of the fastest ways to get something into your bloodstream, and so we're working on that. Now, not everyone can join our club, either physically or they might not qualify even if they live here. And so I think Gayle mentioned our web pages where we have our cookbooks and recipe books, which are being improved upon. We're trying to keep up with the new products, because honestly I don't think all the new products are on the online cookbooks yet. We're still playing catch up. But one of the other things we plan on doing here very soon is kind of with the conclusion of the suppositories, we think we've got the full complement of medicinal cannabis products, and we're making right now a cookbook. It will be published by Hempology 101, and it will be the full and complete package for how to make cannabis medicines using the stalk, leaf, bud, how to do everything with nice pretty pictures, and it'll be probably a better seller than my book, but I'll deal with that. But it is something
sound like
that
you're going to
is-
deal with it well.
No.
Oh, no.
But it is, I think, something really important, and I'm tired of looking at cookbooks that don't tell you how to decarboxylate or otherwise, know much about how to use this medicinally. There's lots of ways to cook cannabis to make it taste like a truffle.
None
but
of them tell
we
you
really
to
need
use
to
this.
make, medicines from this plant and teach people how to do that in a way that benefits them and doctors can appreciate and understand. Because, as I admitted to a cancer talk this week, putting cannabis in cookies may have been a great introduction for patients, but for doctors it's been a roadblock. And so we need to, make this medicine more accessible to doctors by putting it in forms that they're more familiar with. So that's part of what we're doing here as well. Anyhow, thank you again, Gayle, for that talk. And I'm going to remind everybody that next week there isn't a lecture, it's reading week, so we're not going to be in class. We will be at 4:20, but not here. And then in 2 weeks' time, we have another guest speaker, Ernie Jacobs, coming from the North Island Compassion Club to do his first ever talk at a Hempology event. And he'll be discussing his work at the North Island Compassion Club. He's been busted a couple times selling medical marijuana and has really very amazing story. He's quite a trooper, and looking forward to having Ernie come down and spend a day with us here at the university. So that's again in 2 weeks' time. And then just one lecture after that, and that's it for the semester. But thanks everybody for coming, and thanks again, Gayle, for speaking. Have a great day, everyone, and smoke if you want.